Welcome to Video Village. I'm Mihir Shah, and today we are talking about Asteroid City. Asteroid City is Wes Anderson's 11th feature film. It's been out in theaters for almost a month, and I just saw it yesterday. So we'll talk about it briefly, no spoilers. Talk about Wes Anderson and the rest of his work briefly before getting into a ranking of his 11 movies. Asteroid City is Wes Anderson's 11th feature film. His last movie, The French Dispatch, came out in 2021. This movie is about a junior stargazer convention in a retro-futuristic version of 1955. The events of this are staged as a play, and we cut back and forth between this quote-unquote play and a TV special about the making of this play. So we see a movie that is actually a play, and then we see a TV show that is basically showing us the behind the scenes of this play. And if that sounds confusing, don't worry. Even if it is maybe a lot to take in the first 5 minutes of this film, throughout the movie it becomes more clear as to what's actually going on, and doesn't actually take away too much from the rest of the film. Here is the cast list of this movie, and it's pretty long. We have Jason Schwartzman, who has been in a lot of Wes Anderson movies, as have most people I'm about to say, but also this year voiced the Spot character in Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. So Jason Schwartzman, Scarlett Johansson, Tom Hanks, Jeffrey Wright, Tilda Swinton, Bryan Cranston, Edward Norton, Adrian Brody, Liev Schreiber, Maya Hawke, Steve Carell, Hung Chow, Matt Dillon, Willem Dafoe, Margot Robbie, Jeff Goldblum, Rita Wilson, and a handful of other people that I am not personally familiar with. But this is a pretty stacked cast. The music for this film was composed by none other than Alexandre Desplat, who has done a majority of Wes Anderson's movies, as well as a ton of stuff in the last 20 years, including the final 2 Harry Potter films, Pinocchio, The Shape of Water, The Imitation Game, etc., etc. The runtime of this movie is 1 hour and 45 minutes, which is probably, I think, one of Wes Anderson's longest movies. Most of his films kind of hover around 1 hour 30. The budget of this movie was $25 million. It is sitting at $35 million at the box office right now, which I believe in Wes Anderson's world and in the context of his movies is considered a success. He has only really had one big blockbuster movie in his career, and that is The Grand Budapest Hotel, which came out in 2014. I think that's his only movie that's crossed the 100 million mark. So, yeah, did I like it? I did. I did like it. I have it sitting at 3 out of 5 stars right now, if that gives you, if that's just how you like to think about movies. That's where I'm at rating-wise. With all Wes Anderson movies, there's 2 ways to connect with his work. A is, did you enjoy the world that he created and the characters within it, and did you want to revel in what was presented to you? And B, did you connect with the themes that he's exploring within the story and the setting, and were you able to grasp meaning from the many layers of the story presented to you? And so, on the first note of did I enjoy the world that he created and the characters within it, yes and no. Like, I think at times I was kind of attached to what I was seeing, but for a large majority of it, I felt very distanced from the characters. And I think that was kind of by design, given the layout and structure of the story and the themes that I will talk about shortly. But most of the moments that I found substantial lasted from 10 to 30 seconds long. This is not me saying not to go watch this movie. And I think this is like a pretty big point, is that a lot of people who know his work and have seen other of his films or other films of his did like this movie and connected with it. I didn't, but I also connected with movies that a lot of people have said that they didn't, and they didn't like the movie, and I'm a big fan of those. I want to get into more detail about this movie without spoiling anything, and I'll do that a little bit later. But before that, I want to talk about Wes Anderson more broadly. If you've seen one Wes Anderson movie, it's easy to feel like you've seen all of his movies. He has an incredibly distinct visual style. The way he directs actors is incredibly deadpan in all of his films. And on the surface, a lot of people may think that he doesn't have range because of these choices. And I disagree strongly. There's a TikTok trend going on right now about his movies. If you're on Instagram Reels, you might have just seen this. And if you're on YouTube Shorts, you'll see it in 2025. But the TikTok trend is basically like filming your life as if you are in a Wes Anderson film. And it features people kind of trying to film things symmetrically and film things with a certain color palette that is very kind of like monochrome for the most part in either yellow or blue. And have like kind of like deadpan faces throughout and very like dollhouse structured shots. And most of these TikToks are like pretty bad, I think. Like I've only seen like maybe 3 or 4 that I was like, okay, they actually put effort into making this look good. And they also feature like pretty quirky like music that I guess you could relate to Wes Anderson, but like they're not wrong in saying that like that maybe feels like a Wes Anderson movie on the surface, but there's so much more to Wes Anderson. That's like saying Taylor Swift only makes breakup music. It's like, it's not true. Maybe it's not as disrespectful as that statement, but I do find it like grossly underrepresenting what Wes Anderson does in his movies and like what he kind of brings to the table. A bit of background on Wes Anderson. He got his start at the Sundance Film Festival in 1992, I believe. He wrote a short film with his good friend from college, Mr. Owen Wilson, called Bottle Rocket, starring Owen Wilson and his brother Luke Wilson. Owen Wilson, you may know as the voice of Lightning McQueen in Cars, Wedding Crashers. He played Jedediah in Night at the Museum. He's in Midnight in Paris. And he's in almost every single Wes Anderson movie. Luke Wilson, who I love as much as his brother, has had less of a known career, but I personally love him in Legally Blonde. He plays the main love interest for the main character. The good guy, not the bad guy. Like, he's the lawyer we like. Yeah, so lots of filmmakers in the early 90s were starting to make independent short films and get funding and get recognition for feature films. And so did Wes Anderson. So he makes this short film called Bottle Rocket, and it's later a feature film version is funded by James L. Brooks after he saw the movie at Sundance. And since then, he has made 10 more feature films, Asteroid City being his 11th. Visually, he's known for an extensive use of like flat space camera moves where everything looks like it's a 2D image, symmetrical compositions, like I said before, snap zooms, slow motion walking shots, a like very specific color palette based on the movie. Like it's either all yellow or all pink or all blue. A lot of like miniatures in his movies. Like he'll make like tiny little things as part of his backgrounds, and he'll also like have an image and create miniatures of those same images and keep them in the back of the shot so like you can see perspective of things. For example, like in Asteroid City, you have in the foreground like maybe a building and some cactuses, and then what he does is he'll make like mini cactuses and place them in the background of the shots to add perspective, as opposed to like finding a road with a bunch of cactuses or planting real cactuses way in the back. He'll just like make miniatures and try to add depth that way. Let's see. I mean, there's a ton, right? But like, basically, when you see a Wes Anderson movie, like you know, like, oh, this is clearly Wes Anderson. He's very personal, distinct style, and that style has kind of provoked discussion and critical study and a lot of parody, obviously, through TikTok and stuff recently, but even earlier than that. And I guess like what that means for me is that his worlds and his movies feel very self-contained or like very dollhouse. Like they feel like it feels like you're opening up a storybook that has like pop-up images and are saying like, come on into this world and escape for 110 minutes. And then you can leave. And you know you're reading a storybook. You know it's very fictional, but you can't help but smile and enjoy the ride. There's a critic named Jesse Fox Mayshark who has a quote that says his films have a Baroque pop bent that is not realist, surrealist, or magic realist, but rather could be described as fabulist, which I thought was just like kind of an interesting, I don't know, like interesting adjectives to kind of use to describe Wes Anderson. Take that how you will. Thematically, he is known for like kind of talking about grief and loss of innocence, and most of his movies feature very dysfunctional families where there's just like people with kind of toxic relationships with each other. A lot of like fast-paced comedy in a lot of his movies, even if there are like serious elements to them. And, you know, people are doing bad things. Like, there's a lot of abandonment issues. There's like adultery and sibling rivalries and very like unlikely friendships formed in these movies. And they're very character driven to the point of like, sometimes you can be like, well, the plot is one thing, but it's really more about like how Bill Murray and Owen Wilson just talk with each other throughout the entire movie and their relationship. Like, yeah, they go on this adventure, but really what you're watching and kind of paying attention to are the people. So that's, I guess, like in a nutshell, what you can expect with Wes Anderson. Let's talk about like other things around his movies. So he has a very strong recurring relationship with his actors. The cast list for Asteroid City, for example, may seem overwhelming, but his last film, The French Dispatch, wasn't so dissimilar in terms of the number of like huge A-list stars that appear in the movies. And every movie before that boasts a lot of name brand actors as well that you can find in a lot of his movies. Like Bill Murray has been in 9 Wes Anderson movies. Owen Wilson's probably been in like 5 or 6. Jason Schwartzman's been in a ton. Tilda Swinton, Willem Dafoe, Adrian Brody, Edward Norton. All these people have been in like at least 3 to 7 Wes Anderson movies. Actors love working with this guy. Everyone gets paid the same incredibly low salary. Edward Norton just had an interview go viral like this week where he said he made $4,200 for his work on Asteroid City. For his work on any other movie, he would at least make a couple $1 million, for example. But none of these actors seem to care. They're like, despite getting paid a measly salary, they love working with this guy and kind of like go out of their way to make money outside of them so that they can be in these movies. Despite the characters in Wes Anderson movies being very deadpan on the surface with their delivery and like seemingly emotionally stunted, this style that Wes Anderson directs them in actually allows actors to explore their characters in a way that they can't in other movies. There's a quote in Asteroid City where Scarlett Johansson's character says something along the line. I'm going to butcher this is not the real quote, but she says something along the lines of like, we are people who are too damaged or scared or hurt to reveal how we actually feel. And that is kind of like the mantra of every single Wes Anderson character in every single movie. Is like, they react to terrible events around them with just a stare or a cough or a quippy piece of dialogue that's like unrelated to what they're seeing. And it's very funny in most of his movies, or at the very least just like amusing. Like it'll make you like smile or like exhale out of your nose. But as the story unfolds, there's usually a deeper sense of longing or grief revealed in these characters, and you can kind of get to know them at a deeper level. And it just feels like a playground for like these amazing actors who may not get this sort of opportunity in their other jobs. Actors on set all live in the same hotel or building during the filming, and they have dinner together every night, which is, I think, really cute. Bryan Cranston was recently quoted saying that it feels like actors camp, which I thought that was cool. Wes Anderson uses music very well. I think his movies feature great scores, but I think even more than that, he has amazing needle drops throughout his films. He's even credited with bringing renewed fame to musical artists because he features their songs in his movies. An example is the song These Days by Nico, which like I didn't know this song before this movie, but he uses it in about a minute in the movie Royal Tenenbaums, came out in 2001. And it's played during a moment where Gwyneth Paltrow's character comes off of a bus and meets her brother in the movie. And it's like a slow motion shot of her kind of leaving the bus, and it's beautifully framed, and like it's a beautiful shot in general of just like kind of this intro moment. And this song plays, and after this movie came out, there was like this renewed sense of appreciation for this artist, and it was like a huge bump in sales. And like I think now, because it's happened recently with Stranger Things and Running Up That Hill, that song by Kate Bush that was just kind of brought back from the 80s, people kind of take this for granted, but like it takes like truly like it's a skill to supervise music in a film and know what to play when and like why it would be impactful in that moment. And I think he does that well in a lot of movies. I'm thinking of like a couple examples in some of his films. Notably, the Darjeeling Limited has like some amazing needle drops. Whether or not you like that movie, it's another discussion. But like, yeah, I just love the way he kind of like puts in a song and has this montage or has a slow motion moment. It's really fun. So I guess that's like a little bit of a rant, but it's like I really wanted to just summarize Wes Anderson, at least on the surface. I think there's a lot of opinions as to what his best movies are, and I think that really speaks to the fact that people can get attached to his stories in different ways and kind of like immerse themselves in stories in different ways. They're all deeply personal films, and depending on where you are in life, that like some of them might speak to you differently than they did 10, 15 years ago, and maybe they'll speak differently to you in 15 years from now. So I encourage you all to check out his films that we'll be talking about later in the episode. This is like, it's the way people talk about some of the great filmmakers of the past, the Alfred Hitchcocks, where they have this unique style that you can instantly recognize, and you kind of go to the movies and say like, yeah, it's a mystery movie that's going to be made really well. That's Hitchcock. That's what Wes Anderson is, and we're living at his peak. Like, he's 50 some years old and he's pumping out movies left and right, and I think it's such a blessing to be alive while an auteur is like in his bag. So I just think it's like a really, really good opportunity to learn about a filmmaker if you haven't done so already, and check out more of his films. All right, enough softy talk. Let's talk about Asteroid City. Mihir's getting all soft for cinema. I said it wasn't my favorite, but I still liked it. I'm gonna just stop there. I actually had a conversation with my roommate and friend Osman, and we were talking about Christopher Nolan, and I said, I don't think Dunkirk is my favorite Christopher Nolan movie, but I think it's his best. And if that's a hot take to you, then like in a month there's going to be a Christopher Nolan episode. We'll do a deep dive, don't you worry. But he was like, how do you separate the two? How can you say it's not the best, or it is the best but not your favorite? And I said, in my mind, it's very different. I think it's important to designate terms like best and greatest and denote movies that may not be that but are your favorite. Like, I know for a fact that some of my favorite movies I consider to be the greatest in their genre. Like, I think The Lion King is, yes, my favorite animated film, but I also think it's in the conversation for the greatest animated film. Certainly the greatest Disney film, in my opinion. But, another example is like The Emperor's New Groove. I love that movie. I think it's incredible and hilarious. I don't think I'd put it at the top of the list of the greatest animated movies, but I think it's, very close and near and dear to my heart, and I think it's great, but I don't think it's the greatest. That's just an example, but I digress. It was not my favorite, but I still liked it, and here's why. The bulk of the movie is presented as a play, like I said in the very beginning of this episode, and we're watching it as part of a documentary on TV about the creation of the play. So in black and white, we see scenes from this documentary narrated by Bryan Cranston, but kind of like faux fictional scenes in this documentary about the making of the play, and then we cut to the actual play. And I think, so I actually, fun fact, I missed the first 5 minutes of this movie. I watched this yesterday. I was coming from another movie called Elemental at a different theater, and I timed it perfectly except for the fact that it was pouring rain, so I had to find a lift and I didn't have internet. Anyway, I missed the first 5 minutes of this film. Luckily, I had read up about it and knew the format, which is kind of all I missed when I got into it. And despite like missing the whole exposition of this film, I still didn't find it that confusing. What I did find confusing was why we were going back and forth in the first place. Like, I understood the format, but the entire time, or not the entire time, but about half the movie, I was a little puzzled as to like, what is the significance of this? Because Wes Anderson does this whole idea of like story within a story a lot. Most of his movies nowadays start with like somebody either literally opening up a storybook and saying, let me tell you about this, or talking to somebody and saying, let me tell you the story about this. And then we see that movie as that story. This was different. This was us going back and forth, and it felt like there was a large amount of significance placed on the scenes taking place in the TV documentary about the creation of the play. And my questions to that were answered, or at least they were talked about, if not answered. So what do I mean by that? I guess the plot of this movie, the more I think about it, is not the focus of the movie. There is a plot, there are events happening, and there is like a beginning, middle, and end to the story. But I think there's a large theme of existentialism portrayed in the film, illustrated by them being in Asteroid City and witnessing an extraterrestrial event. That's not spoiling anything. That's part of the promotional material. I'll leave it at that. But the characters are left thinking about their place in the world after this event. And I found it really compelling that the actors in the play, when we see them in black and white, are grappling with the same issues that their characters are in the play. And there's a handful of moments that are sort of like that, where you see the actors, specifically Jason Schwartzman's character, struggle to separate himself from his character in the play and not be able to, process his real life versus his life in the play. And that felt like a real comment on the nature of making art and the purpose of it. And I don't think I got an answer from Wes Anderson. I mean, there might be answers in there that I just missed. But experiencing the characters in the play grapple with that question was fascinating to me. I think a lot of things went over my head in this movie, more so than other Wes Anderson films. Like, there's usually a lot of his films, really in the last 10 years, that I'll think about and say, like, man, I actually need to rewatch that, because there was a lot going on that I was just like, oh, that was cute, and that's it. That's all I got from it, is like, that was fun to watch. And I know that there's a lot more meaning kind of stuffed into these frames that are jam-packed with things to look at. And this was no different. I think there, even more so, was a lot of things there that I just couldn't connect to, and I encourage you all to go and see if you can do better than I did. It's a very amusing movie. I'm refraining from saying the word funny because I never laughed out loud once or really felt the urge to, except for this one moment where there's like a song and dance sequence that caught me off guard. But besides that, I mean, I was smiling through a lot of the movie, which I do most of Wes Anderson's movies. Like, I think especially his more kind of playful worlds like Grand Budapest Hotel and Isle of Dogs, there's just a lot to love on screen. Fun set pieces and sequences where we get to see the characters interacting and talking with other characters or about other characters or about ideas in the film. An example is like Steve Carell is in this movie and plays the owner of the motels in Asteroid City, I guess. And he's at the scene of the crime for a lot of visual gags that hit pretty well. He's also doing a lot of like exposition work, but it's just like amusing. I like Steve Carell. I like hearing him talk and the way he talks, and he's just kind of goofy in this movie. But on the note of feeling distance from other characters, I don't have much else to say besides that. Like, the other characters I connected to the most were the few characters presented in the black and white segments, because I think that they have an important role in kind of introducing you to this idea of the film and taking you out of just Asteroid City. Adrian Brody plays the director of the play, and we see him talking to his actors about what he wants from them. And then we see him talking to his wife, who he is, I won't say anything more, but he's talking to his wife. And in that conversation, we get to know him very well. We get to know his wife very, very well and their kind of circumstance. And it was just a quick little segment, and I found it deeply compelling. But we don't get to hang out with him for that long. And I guess that's what I'm feeling right now, is that there's just this gap between you and, me, the audience, and the characters. More so than just them being deadpan. It's like they purposefully wanted you to look at all of these people and decide for yourself like what their purpose was or something. Either way, I've left with more questions than answers. So yeah, that's where I'm at. Go see this movie. If you aren't compelled to go see it based on what I just said, I don't blame you, especially if you haven't seen other Wes Anderson movies. But if you're interested in getting to know this filmmaker more and hearing about what I think his best movies are and why, then stick around, because we're about to rank them. Alright, let's do some ranking. This is the thing about Wes Anderson. Let's say you are ranking the movies of Well, let's say you're ranking like Pixar movies, right? Something I will be doing later this week. There's certain movies that you would just expect are towards the top of the list. Even if like you have different opinions as to like where it goes, like there is a certain level of respect that certain movies just command. The thing about Wes Anderson movies, which I find so interesting, is that if you Google Wes Anderson films ranked online and you pull up the first 10 links, I guarantee you they will all be different. They will all have different movies at different places, and there's no agreed upon this is the best, and there's no agreed upon this is the worst. I think there's like important conversations to be had about like the significance of some of his movies and the impact of them. But in terms of like what speaks to me and what people like around me, it's so subjective. And so I'm just saying this from the get is that this is like, obviously like any list or ranking or draft that I do is inherently subjective because it's me and everyone's opinion is going to be different, even if I'm using a critical lens. But this is like one of my overtly subjective lists. This is like Wes Anderson ranked based on how much I liked his movie. You know, I was supposed to record this episode 2 weeks ago with Burva, who, shout out Burva, my guy is grinding, studying for the bar exam. He takes it 2 weeks from when I'm recording this. And he had like one evening open where he was like, all right, let's draft. And the thing is, I had spent the last 4 days before that doing nothing but watching Wes Anderson feature films and Wes Anderson short films to prepare for the podcast. And then it came time to record the podcast and I was like, I'm too tired. I'm brain dead and I'm going to go to sleep. So I couldn't do it with Burva, which makes my life easier, if not more boring, because me and Burva disagree on most Wes Anderson movies. Like, there's a couple that we both like, there's a couple that we both dislike, but we would have very different lists, and it would be really hard to agree on a ranking together. It would be fun, but it would be hard. So like I said, this is a ranking. This is based on how much I liked the movies, and I'll talk about each movie and give you a little bit of a synopsis and why I did or did not like it. This is spoiler free, so don't worry. This is purely just recommending movies. But let's get into it. Like I said, 11 feature films. I'm not talking about his short films. I've seen 100% of Wes Anderson films at this point, which is the only filmmaker I can say that about, which is really exciting for me. But I've seen all 11 of his short films and like all, 7 or 8 of his short films. Did I say that feature films? Whatever. I've seen all his movies. Let's just start. In number 11, this is a movie that I've seen a lot of people put at number 1. And a lot of people put it at number 11. So like right off the bat, this is going to just... If you've seen Wes Anderson movies and you have opinions, this might just like cut my viewership in half immediately. Number 11, I'm going to put Rushmore. This is Wes Anderson's second feature film released in 1998, starring Jason Schwartzman and Bill Murray, as well as Olivia Williams in a supporting role. Here's a synopsis. When a beautiful first grade teacher arrives at a prep school, she soon attracts the attention of an ambitious teenager named Max, who quickly falls in love with her. Max turns to the father of 2 of his schoolmates for advice on how to woo the teacher. However, the situation soon gets complicated when Max's new friend becomes involved with her, setting the 2 pals against one another in a war for her attention. If that sounds weird to you, if you're like, wait, did he just say that like a student and a dad are vying for teacher's attention? Yeah, that is why it's just weird. It's just a weird premise. Here's the thing. I don't mind a weird premise because it knows it's weird and it knows it's like, yeah, that's not what should happen. A lot of this movie is the love interest Olivia Williams looking around her saying like, we can't be together because you're a kid, and we shouldn't be together. You're like an old man. The reason I didn't like it, I think, is just that like, it's just a really white movie. Wes Anderson's movies are really white in general. Don't get me wrong. It's like not a great space for people of color or stories of color. We can get into that later with the Darjeeling Limited. But this is like an overtly just like white premise of like, let's see a bunch of white kids like in school hit on a teacher and like be quote unquote funny. It just did not connect with me that well. That being said, like, I don't want to paint a wrong picture here. People say that this is Wes Anderson's greatest film. People also say that like it's culturally significant because it revives Bill Murray's career and kind of starts this chain of him being an independent movie star. He had been like a blockbuster comedy star for many years and then had a low period in his career, comes back with this and, then goes on to star in not just most Wes Anderson films, but a lot of independent dramas and comedies as well. It also is like one of the more important movies about a sociopath or a psychopath, whatever you want to call him in this, probably a sociopath. The main character, that teenager who falls in love with the teacher. And people say that it is one of the better teen coming of age stories. It didn't work for me like that. I think there's just it's early Wes Anderson style and themes that don't feel as well formed as some of his later works do for me, with just I don't know, just something about kids and teachers is you got to make it overtly comedic. Don't have moments where they take themselves seriously, and it's just weird for me. There's also a moment where my guy is drenched in water and rain and jumps onto the woman's bed. She's not on the bed, but he just jumps onto the bed with his shoes on, with his wet clothes on. And that was the moment. It was the last half of the movie. And that was the moment where I was yep, this is white. This is just pure whiteness in a film. There's no way to sugarcoat it. It's overtly and irrevocably just white. That's my number 11, Rushmore. I don't recommend watching it. I think if you're curious about Wes Anderson's work at this point in your life, you should watch it. If you honestly think, there are funny parts of the movie. There's funny quotes. There's a part where he says, there's a man in the woman's life, and he is a healthcare worker of some sort. I forgot, a doctor or something. And he comes to dinner wearing his scrubs because he didn't know that they were going to have this dinner.
I like your nurse's uniform, guy.
These are OR scrubs.
Oh, are they?
I thought that was really stupid, but really funny. They got me there. But that's one of the highlights. So if that doesn't seem like it's appealing to you, then maybe it's not for you. All right, let's move on. Number 10. The next 10 movies I like. Rushmore was the only one where I'm don't watch it. The rest of these, I think that they actually have a lot to bring to the table. Number 10 is Bottle Rocket. This is Wes Anderson's first feature film, his debut film.
Bob Mapplethorpe, potential getaway driver. Go.
I really want to be a part of this team. And I'm the only one with a car. That's good. That's good. Because that hits me right here.
I'm Anthony. You speak English?
It's amazing how close you can get to a girl when you're not allowed to talk to her.
And my name's Dignan, man.
You in the army, yes?
No, I just had short hair.
Written by Owen Wilson, starring Owen Wilson and Luke Wilson. It is about a group of friends who are trying to be criminals. They're not really criminals, but basically one of their friends hatches this scheme where he wants to rob his old boss because he felt disrespected or something. And it's just this goofy buddy comedy where they are friends, and then there's a woman that gets in the way of that, and he just wants to pull off this really successful crime with his friend. Very lighthearted, very funny, and Luke Wilson again. Luke Wilson's stock in the late 90s, early 2000s was so high with this and Royal Tenenbaums, which we'll talk about later, and Legally Blonde. I just love him. I think he's so attractive and so fun. Owen Wilson is just hilarious in everything he's in. A lot of the comedy, not a lot, some of the comedy doesn't work for me. I think the storytelling itself is a little weak. There's not too much of a plot, and there's not too much substance, I think, in a lot of the frames. The last act, I think, is really fun. When their final kind of heist that they pull off, I think, is really entertaining. And features a really surprising and fun performance from James Caan. James Caan most famously probably played Sonny in The Godfather way back when. And you may not know that that's the same guy who plays Will Ferrell's dad in the movie Elf. Same guy, James Caan. And you can see James Caan in this movie wearing a kimono and I guess helping them commit this crime. I don't know. I just think it's fun. All right, that's number 10. Number 9, this is where I'm putting Asteroid City.
Where are you?
Asteroid City, Farm Route 6, mile 75.
Junior stargazers and space cadets. Each year we celebrate Asteroid Day, commemorating September 23rd, 3007 BC, when the arid plains meteorite made Earth impact.
Holy Toledo, that's Mitch Campbell.
You're very good in the one about the tramp in the brothel who gets amnesia and becomes a pediatrician. You were very awesome.
Actually, maybe my favorite character I've ever
I don't know why nobody else liked it.
Oh.
I won't talk about it too much else. I think that if I rewatch it, it might bump up more. But at this point, I did not connect with it the way I was able to connect with the next 8 movies. So that is that. Number 8. This is where I'm going to have The French Dispatch, 2021 film.
It began as a holiday. Eager to escape a bright future on the Great Plains, Arthur Howitzer Jr. transformed the series of travelogue columns into The French Dispatch, a factual weekly report on the subjects of world politics, the arts, high and low, and diverse stories of human interest.
You don't think it's almost too seedy this time?
No, I
For
don't.
decent people.
It's supposed to be charming.
He assembled a team of the best expatriate journalists of his time: Berenson, Sazerac, Kremens, Roebuck Wright. These were his people.
Just try to make it sound like you wrote it that way on purpose.
This is about the staff of a European publication that decides to publish a memorial edition highlighting the 3 best stories from the last decade. Here are the 3 stories. An artist sentenced to life imprisonment, student riots, and a kidnapping resolved by a chef. So that's a little bit like in the weeds. Basically what this is it's like you're reading The New Yorker, except you're watching a movie. So you feel like you're reading these like crazy in-depth tales that are in the New Yorker magazine that are like really quirky and about these very specific things that have a very like politicized opinion about things. And you basically watch an anthology, a collection of these short stories. And it keeps coming back to the editor's room where they're kind of talking about the stories and going from story to story. But they don't inherently connect the stories. It's not like, oh, in this story you can see that other character from that other story, and that's how this connects to that. That's not what we're doing here. We're not trying to create like a multiverse within this movie. What this really is just like Wes Anderson playing with form and structure and saying like, okay, like here is what I can do despite you telling me that I have this distinct style. Like I'm going to take it to the max and give you even more of this distinct style, but now make the storytelling even less linear and easy to understand. And I know Barva hates this movie with a passion. This would probably be on the bottom of his list. I understand why people would feel that way. It's not a traditional movie where you can kind of like point out the beginning, middle, and end. I just really liked a lot of the stories and the worlds that they create. There's like moments where they'll have this like, and this is true about all of his movies, but there's moments where they show you this amazing shot for like a second, and there's like so much going on in each frame, and it was just so much fun for me to kind of like dive into this world of the French Dispatch, this magazine that was really charming, and I liked a lot of the stories and I found them very compelling. I did find it a little frustrating that they didn't connect more easily, but I bet you if I watched this again, I could probably find thematic similarities between the two and figure out a way to kind of like derive meaning between the stories as opposed to just within each one. Like I said earlier in the podcast, an amazing cast. Here are some of the people in it that, this cast list really reminds me of Asteroid City in a way, but Benicio del Toro, Adrian Brody, Tilda Swinton, Lea Seydoux, Frances McDormand, Timothée Chalamet, Jeffrey Wright, Bill Murray, Owen Wilson, Henry Winkler, Christoph Waltz, Tom Hudson, Willem Dafoe, Edward Norton, Saoirse Ronan, Elizabeth Moss. There's like a ton of people in this movie. So if you're into like this idea of watching a movie that feels like you're watching The New Yorker, highly recommend. I think it's fantastic and really charming. All right. Number 7 is a movie called The Darjeeling Limited. This is a 2007 movie about 3 brothers who have not spoken to each other in a year since their father died. who set off on a train voyage across India with the plan to find themselves and bond with each other.
I think we have a chance to make this kind of a life-changing experience, and I think we need it.
I want us to become brothers again like we used to be. You're the two most important people in the world to me. This is incredible! Why haven't we spoken in a year?
Because we don't trust each other.
Is that my belt? Can I borrow it?
I want us to be completely open and say yes to everything, even if it's shocking and painful. You have any questions?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
What happened to your face?
I'll be honest, I going into this movie, I didn't think I would like it as much as I did. There is a narrative around this film that it is culturally insensitive to India, and the way they portray Indians are very stereotypical and like very on the surface. I think that Wes Anderson is smarter than these people give him credit for. This movie, so like just backing up, I think this movie is really charming. And the chemistry between the three brothers, played by Owen Wilson, Adrian Brody, and Jason Schwartzman, is fantastic. Anytime it's just them talking or fighting on screen, I'm just like, I could watch them all day. They each have very distinct personalities and characters, and they have a lot going for them in terms of like just wanting to hang out with them and like them more. This story is really about like Americans traveling to what they consider to be a foreign, spiritual, magical land and looking for enlightenment. And they're basically doing everything they can to ignore the fact that India will not inherently provide any of that. And I think the film is like very aware of that. Like there's like a lot of visual gags that show you that these are just like stupid Americans trying to find something that is not inherently around them. There's even a shot of them riding gloriously into the sunset and then a car following them with these Indians literally carrying their baggage. And it's like, I think it's a really funny visual image that was just very on the nose about like, yeah, these are people who are like, they think they're doing something that is very deep and enlightening, and they're not. Like the meaning that they derive and the true lessons that they learn are in these very human moments between them that have nothing to do with India. And every time they are looking for meaning around them in India, it's just played for laughs. There's another moment where Owen Wilson's character has one of his shoes stolen by like the little kid who was shining his shoes, and he like chases this kid and loses him, and then looks around at where he's at the buildings and goes, "God, I love this city," or "God, I love this place." And it's like, no, you don't. You literally just got your shoe stolen, but you just think that like you're in this magical land that like that everything happens for a reason, blah blah blah. And so you are saying you love this place. And like the movie, like the movie is very aware of that. That's why those lines exist. And so I think what I'm basically saying is like, I don't agree with the criticism that it is culturally insensitive to India. Like, do I wish there were more Indian characters up front that were part of the story somehow? Sure. But I don't think that's what the movie's trying to do. So I don't think that's fair criticism to just say it should have had more of this. Yeah, I like this movie a lot. There's a lot of fun in it. There's a lot of heart in it. There's moments between the brothers that I still think about in terms of like the images and the meaning behind them. And it just kind of ends with this idea of like these characters have a lot of growth to do, and I just found that really charming. A lot of great needle drops as always, and I love that there is a overt reference to Indian cinema with this image of them trying to catch a train. The image that we know is from, most likely that you think about, is from DDLJ, or Dilwale Dulhania Le Jayenge, the romantic movie from the 90s that's really famous. But that train image is actually from an old Indian film called... Okay, it took me a while to find it, so I had to cut out the actual time that it took. But the movie is called, I think it's called Pather Panchali, Pather Panchali, directed by Satyajit Ray in the year 1955. This is This is on my list of the greatest movies of all time, that Sight and Sound poll that I'm trying to watch every movie of. And I was not aware, but that image of trying to catch a train is actually like can be traced back to this movie as opposed to like DDLJ that made it famous in our pop culture today. So yeah, I appreciated the homages there. And yeah, just a really fun, charming film. So go watch it. It's a good one. All right, moving on. Number 6, I have Moonrise Kingdom. Now, I believe this might be Barva's favorite movie. I'm citing Barva as if like he's here, and so I don't know why I'm doing that. I'm trying to give you like a reference as to like there's people in my life who have seen all these movies and have very different opinions than me. So just letting you know that like everyone kind of feels differently. Moonrise Kingdom is a 2012 movie about kids at a summer camp, and the equivalent to like Boy Scouts, and one of the kids runs away from camp to go escape with his crush. These two 12-year-olds basically make a secret pact and run away together into the wilderness, and various authorities try to hunt them down with this violent storm in the distance that's kind of closing in. And it's basically just this like peaceful island community being turned upside down, and you get to know the kids as characters, yes, but also all the adults around them and the parents of the kids and the cops and the feelings between them and all these things.
Dear Susie, here's my plan.
Dear Sam, my answer is yes.
Dear Susie, 1.
Dear Sam, where?
Dear Susie, walk 400 yards due north from your house to the dirt path which has not got any name on it. Turn right and follow to the end. I will meet you in the meadow.
Who's missing? Shukusky, you in there?
I like this movie. I think it's very charming. I didn't attach to this movie as well as the top 5 in my list. So that's really why I didn't break through for me. But I think the world has a lot to love and a lot to offer. And there's a lot of like fun in this movie. It's one of like, I think Wes Anderson's most like overtly charming films because it's about young love and other adults around them falling in love as well. Of course, like any of his films, a great cast. We have the two kids are Jared Gilman and Kara Hayward. I don't think I've seen them in other things. Actually, I have. That's so interesting. Kara Hayward was in a movie called Us and Manchester by the Sea. Let's see what Jared Gilman was in. Jared Gilman was in no movie I have heard of. So, moving on. Other actors in this movie are Bruce Willis, Edward Norton, Bill Murray, Frances McDormand, Tilda Swinton, Jason Schwartzman. Just pausing there. All of those actors, I've said like their name 4 times in this podcast. Just letting you know. Harvey Keitel, Lucas Hedges, Gabriel Rush. Just a great cast. And Bruce Willis, fantastic. Just really loved him in this film. I think Bruce Willis is a very underrated actor. And obviously everyone remembers him as the Die Hard guy, but he's done a lot of great stuff. I think this is just a really, really cute world. And one of those times where I never felt like the stakes were too high. Like I knew that everything would kind of work out as they mostly do in Wes Anderson films. And the themes that they're kind of talking about in general are a little bit lighter in my opinion than some of the more, like grief-stricken and like more tragic stories that are in Wes Anderson's filmography. And so if that appeals to you, I think you'd really like this movie. This, in terms of like the timeline of his films, there's a period of time that I consider between like 2001 and 2012 where he makes, let's say, 5 movies. And everything after those films in the last 10 years have had this overt dollhouse structured like over the top way of being made. And I'm not saying over the top in a bad way. I'm saying like when you watch these movies, it's so obvious that it is Wes Anderson at the top of his game, just like creating these massive sets and these like huge pieces of art that just completely envelop you in the world. This is the last time where it's like you can see elements of that. There's lots of dollhouse elements to this, but like after this, the next couple of movies that he does are just like him at the height of his like Wes Anderson-ness, for the lack of adjectives. All right, now my top 5 Wes Anderson movies. Number 5 And like I said about Moonrise Kingdom being probably Barbara's favorite, like I think this movie in particular, my number 5, you will see at the top of many people's lists, and I understand why. This is the Grand Budapest Hotel.
Why do you want to be a lobby boy?
Who wouldn't? At the Grand Budapest, sir.
And so my life began. Junior lobby boy in training under the strict command of Monsieur Gustave H. Many of the hotel's most valued and distinguished guests came for him.
I love you.
I love you. She was dynamite in the sack, by the way.
She was 84.
I've had older.
This was also when I met Agatha.
She's charming. She's so charming.
Is he flirting with you?
Yes.
I approve of this union.
I became his pupil, and he was to be my counselor and guardian.
The police are here.
Tell them I'll be right down. She's been murdered, and you think I did it.
Released in 2014, this is Wes Anderson's biggest movie to date in terms of critical and commercial success. This is his only movie that crossed $100 million in box office, and it got 9 Oscar nominations, I believe. I think it won for production design and for score and, 2 others, maybe even screenplay and something else. So, I think like the Grand Budapest Hotel, when it came out, people were talking about it, and suddenly Wes Anderson was like not just this little indie filmmaker that makes small movies. Like now he's an Oscar-nominated director and writer. So this really kind of carried him to this new level and new phase in his career. Here's the premise. The Grand Budapest Hotel tells of a legendary concierge at a famous European hotel between the wars and his friendship with a young employee who becomes his trusted protege. The story involves the theft and recovery of a priceless Renaissance painting, the battle for an enormous family fortune, and the slow and then sudden upheavals that transformed Europe during the first half of the 20th century. That all sounds like you're watching like a 3-hour epic war drama. That is not what this is. This is literally like a very charming story about a hotel concierge and his friendship with like a bellboy, and this little adventure they go on where like he inherits something that no one wants him to have, and so he's kind of hunted by a bunch of people. And it's really fun. It's really funny. It's very fun. Like it's laugh out loud funny at times. Here's the main cast is Ray Fiennes, who plays Voldemort, and the new M in James Bond. What else? He was in The Menu recently as the main chef. He is fantastic. He is the main character here, and a handful of supporting characters around him. Tony Revolori, who is in a lot of Wes Anderson films. You might recognize him from the Tom Holland Spider-Man movies as Flash, that annoying guy at school who's like kind of his bully, kind of like wants to be his best friend. He's really good in this movie as well. He plays that protege character. And here are the names I'm going to drop again: Adrian Brody, Willem Dafoe, Jeff Goldblum, Edward Norton, Harvey Keitel, Bill Murray, Saoirse Ronan, Jason Schwartzman, Lea Seydoux, Tilda Swinton, Owen Wilson. All these guys are fantastic. I love the world. I love the actual hotel and the set that they build. It's fantastic. The exteriors and the interiors here are great. The color palette is like these pinks and purples that I think are really unique and just really pretty. And these pastels are just fun to look at. This is a movie, like a handful of these movies I just watched in the last month, and this is no exception. And I was just taken aback at like how visually stunning it was, and some really, really fun action adventure set pieces as well. And there is a heart to this movie, specifically in the story within a story aspect of this. It basically is told as like whoever runs the hotel now. I won't spoil it. Whoever runs the hotel now is basically telling this story to a reporter about like how this hotel used to be run, and then you kind of see the movie as what used to happen at this hotel. And I think there is a lot of heart in that kind of like retelling of reality, and I found it very charming. Highly recommend this one. This is one that like if you watch and you tell somebody you watched, 9 times out of 10 people will know this movie, or at least like be like, oh yeah, I've heard of that. Definitely one of his most famous ones. Number 4 is a movie called The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. This is 2004 movie with Bill Murray in the leading role.
The Belafonte, home to Team Zissou. Skilled crew of deep-sea divers, adventurers, documentary filmmakers.
Action!
Led by internationally renowned oceanographer Captain Steve Zissou, expert on every aspect of marine life.
Swamp leeches, everybody! Check for swamp leeches. Nobody else got hit? I'm the only one? What's the deal?
But there remains one form of life about which Captain Zissou knows very little.
You're supposed to be my son, right? I want you on Team Zissou.
The answer's yes.
Well, it's got to be. I'll order you a red cap and a Speedo.
Here is the synopsis. Renowned oceanographer Steve Zissou has sworn vengeance upon the rare shark that devoured a member of his crew, who's also one of his good friends. In addition to his regular team, he is joined on his boat by Ned, a man who believes Zissou to be his father. Ned is played by Owen Wilson, and Jane, played by Cate Blanchett, a journalist pregnant by a married man. They travel the sea, all too often running into pirates and perhaps more dramatically, various figures from Zissou's past. This movie is incredibly charming. I looked it up. This is actually his least critically acclaimed movie, which I found to be like so surprising. It also says on like Wikipedia, for example, that like in recent years people have revisited this movie and critics are like, actually this movie rocks. And I'm like, yeah, this movie rocks. It is very funny. It takes place mostly on water, on this ship, and they take time to kind of detail out the setting of the ship and how the rooms are connected, and that's really, really, really fun. I love all the characters, and the vibes are just fantastic. There's a character whose pretty much sole purpose is to like play music, and he speaks Portuguese, and he's like playing Portuguese covers of songs on guitar, including Major Tom, which is just an awesome segment. Yeah, this is just a pleasant world that I'd happily hang out in for like 10 more hours than the movie lasts. Owen Wilson is a national treasure, and Cate Blanchett was an incredible surprise in the movie. Willem Dafoe is hilarious in this film. I love his character. And Bill Murray, someone who I usually am like okay on, I actually really liked. There are like 3 or maybe even more. There's a couple of times where like he drops these gay jokes, and that wasn't great. But besides that, this ages beautifully. I know that's like a weird thing to say, but like everything outside of those jokes make this like feel like a movie that could have come out yesterday and been just as good. Like I said, it's laugh out loud funny. It's more than amusing, which is, I think amusing is a word that I use for his movies a lot, and this is more so than that. And this is really like before Wes Anderson became so overtly obsessed with the symmetry of everything, that all those elements are more naturally woven throughout, where it's like there's sometimes where you like forget that it's a Wes Anderson film, which I found very refreshing. And yeah, it's just incredibly creative and incredibly grounded, which is a pretty high bar for Wes Anderson. I think he surpasses it. So I really like this film. There's a lot to love. Really fun, charming story with a beautiful little thing at the end, little moment at the end. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Alrighty, top three Wes Anderson movies. This is surprising. My number 3, the podcast that I personally love and listen to a lot, The Big Picture, voted this the number 11 spot. I found that to be incredibly disrespectful. I get their criticism of it. I don't care. I think it's an amazing film. I'm also very partial to animation. And so, with no shame, my number 3 film is Isle of Dogs.
The Japanese archipelago, 20 years in the future. Canine saturation has reached epidemic proportions. An outbreak of dog flu rips through the city of Megasaki. Mayor Kobayashi issues emergency orders, calling for a hasty quarantine. Trash Island becomes an exile colony. The Isle of Dogs.
I don't think I can stomach any more of this garbage.
Exactly.
Same here.
Words out of my mouth.
Isle of Dogs, released in 2018, is a movie about an outbreak of canine flu in a future Japanese city that leads the mayor to banish all dogs to an island that's basically just a garbage dump. And These dogs basically soon embark on a journey when a 12-year-old boy arrives on the island to reconnect with his lost dog. Right there, like, that's just such a cute premise. And I think Wes Anderson does animation beautifully. And this is just like one of the most impressive technically and one of the most fun movies I've ever seen. There's just a lot going on there. There's like a really complete and full fun story about like why these dogs ended up there and like the politics around what happened and Japanese culture and Japanese politics. And I think Wes Anderson is like concerned with it and talks about it, but doesn't necessarily challenge a whole lot. I think this is much more so just like about the narrative of the story, which I think is one of his strongest narratives, just like telling a complete story beginning, middle, and end if you're into that sort of thing. Great music, great vibes, like really, really fun transitions and action adventure sequences in this film. And I just wish this was like a 10-hour Netflix show because I would watch every single frame. Not much else to say about it. I just think it's great. I think people who don't really like animation like that don't like this movie. And unlucky for them, this is not their list. It's mine. That's my number 3. And my number 2 is also animated. Number 2 is Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Welcome to the fantastic world of Mr. Fox.
Woo! Should we dance?
His life is fantastic.
Pure wild animal craziness.
His wife is fantastic.
If what I think is happening, it better not be.
His neighbors, not so fantastic.
2009 film, came out in a great year for animation, came out the same year as Up and Coraline. And I think because of that, maybe did not get all the critical acclaim that it deserved. It certainly got a lot, but you know, Up took home the award for Best Animated Feature. In retrospect, I would give it to this. I think this is a far greater film than Up, excuse me. Fantastic Mr. Fox, based on Roald Dahl's novel, is about a fox bored with his current life who plans a heist against 3 local farmers. And the farmers are tired of sharing their chickens with this sly fox, try to get revenge against him and his family. Incredible voice cast. George Clooney as Mr. Fox, Meryl Streep as his wife, Jason Schwartzman, Bill Murray, Willem Dafoe, Owen Wilson. You know, no surprises there. If you see like the behind the scenes of this film, I think it's really cute that like there are behind the scenes footage of George Clooney and other characters like acting in real life as if they're being filmed, and then Wes Anderson took those images and kind of recreated them with stop motion animation. So like if there's a shot of Mr. Fox on a motorcycle, there's George Clooney in a field on a motorcycle pretending like he's being filmed. And a lot of the images are very poignant in this movie, but more so than that, this is like his movie that I think is so overtly kind of, I guess, depicting morals and has a clear view on things. And maybe that's because it's, I think, his only adapted work. Like this is obviously based on a novel that exists already. And I think it's really refreshing to like see an animated movie made for kids that has that sort of moral, that also has this like incredible attention to detail and these moments, these like raw moments of emotion and like adult themes that you don't pick up on as a kid. And that's something that we all took for granted in the 2000s with all those Pixar films. And now, like every time we get them, I'm just like, thank God animation still is doing things that work. And yeah, this is a fantastic movie. And last, but absolutely not the least, in fact, the greatest Wes Anderson film of all time, in my humble opinion, is 2001's The Royal Tenenbaums.
There were 3 extraordinary children in the Tenenbaum family.
I said sell it, yeah.
Chaz Tenenbaum was a financial expert and started buying real estate in his early teens. Margot Tenenbaum was an acclaimed playwright and won a Pulitzer Prize in the 9th grade. Richie Tenenbaum was a champion tennis player ranked 2nd in the world by age 17. They were brilliant. They were famous. They were unlucky enough to be the children of a man named Royal Tenenbaum.
Are you getting divorced?
It doesn't look good.
Was it our fault?
Obviously, we made certain sacrifices as a result of having children, but No, Lord, no.
The Royal Tenenbaums is about a man named Royal Tenenbaum and his wife, who had 3 children and then separated. And all three children were extraordinary and they were all geniuses, but virtually all memory of their amazingness is kind of just like overtaken by the next 20 years of their life, where the family kind of becomes incredibly dysfunctional. There's a lot of betrayal and just like a lot of broken relationships. And they basically considered this mostly to be their father's fault. And it isn't until one random winter where they have this unexpected reunion together, all together as one family. And this like cast of characters basically spends time together, and you get to learn about their relationships. And I'm not doing a good job selling literally what I think is a masterpiece. How do I talk about such greatness? This feels like Wes Anderson's most complete and fresh work, where you have, yes, another dysfunctional family, and yes, like a bunch of like weird relationships with people, but the overall themes and the story that they're trying to tell feels like it's incredibly grounded in emotion. Whereas, like, yes, you still had that deadpan nature, but it's not overt yet, right? This is his 3rd movie ever. And so it's not like you have characters that feel like they're doing deadpan so much as that you feel like the characters truly have things inside them that they just don't want to reveal or share because they're so hurt or damaged or scared. This is the only Wes Anderson movie, I believe, that Ben Stiller is in, and Ben Stiller is incredible in this film. He plays a guy who lost his wife, and his wife died, and he takes care of his 2 kids. His emotional journey in this movie is one of the most compelling things I've ever seen from any comedic actor, let alone Ben Stiller. And this movie features some of the best needle drops. I already mentioned one of them earlier when talking about Wes Anderson, kind of more broadly. But it also is one of the most heavy in terms of like, not just subject matter, but like, I guess like events that take place in the film. I think like this and the Darjeeling Limited both feature some like really harrowing events, and the way that it is treated in this movie with like the utmost care and also just like remaining entertaining and memorable, I think is like so great. I think this is Wes Anderson's masterpiece. It also was kind of like the production of this film adds to the vibe where I believe this is the only film where Gene Hackman is an actor, and Gene Hackman plays the father, Mr. Royal Tenenbaum. And Gene Hackman and Wes Anderson did not get along on set, and I think that's really funny because his character doesn't get along with most other characters in the movie. And I can't help but to wonder if like the on-set troubles added to what we get to see on screen. Just a little fun little tidbit there. This movie also inspired a lot of like Halloween costumes. This is the first time, I think, where like people watch this movie. It's pretty well known. It gets nominated for an Oscar for screenplay. And the next year you see a lot of Halloween costumes of like Gwyneth Paltrow's fur coat, or like Ben Stiller's red outfit, or Luke Wilson's headband and like athletic gear. There's a lot of like very notable fashion things in this movie that I just think are like fun to watch and to like have characterized in this movie. And yeah, you know, like a dysfunctional family is one thing, but to like watch a dysfunctional family slowly try to like piece the pieces together, I think it's just like really fun and entertaining here, and not like there is heavy subject matter, but like it's treated very well. And yeah, this movie was written by Mr. Owen Wilson along with Wes Anderson as well. Owen Wilson just at the scene of the crime everywhere. It also had like a pretty big legacy on just like comedy filmmaking in general. The show 30 Rock, Alec Baldwin has like openly credited the character that he plays on 30 Rock of like being inspired by this movie and Gene Hackman's character. Jason Bateman says that Arrested Development is basically like Royal Tenenbaums, but shot like something differently. But the vibes of this like family that's dysfunctional is pretty much the same. And so yeah, I'm not going to talk too much about this at this point. I feel like I already kind of like butchered the hype of that I feel about this movie and the way I described it, so sorry about that. I just think it's his masterpiece. I think it's his greatest work, and I think it's just really, really nice. Check out all of his movies. Check out any of his movies. I think that there's so much to love here. I hope you guys have enjoyed learning a little bit more about Wes Anderson. And stay tuned, because this is a pretty big summer for movies. So we're going to have a lot of episodes dropping in the next 4 to 5 weeks. Until then, till I see you guys next, take care, and I'll see you at the movies. Special thanks to my lovely girlfriend Krupa Patel for the podcast's artwork, and my good friend Kevin Cow for the music that you're listening to now. You can find more of his music on Instagram at Waguang Beats. Thanks, y'all.